welcome back. I'm Celestia Astrology. I'm Sonia, and welcome this week, this month, all the month of September. I'm joined by my good friend Janessa from the Astro Garden. And Janessa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Sonia. I'm Janessa. I am by Jove Astro on Instagram, and then I have the project, the Astro Garden, which is my podcast. And yeah, I'm an astrologer. I offer readings, all different types over on my website by joveastrology.com. And yeah, so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's lovely. And Janessa said that she'll be sharing the recordings on her channel as well, so you can find her at the Astro Garden. So you can watch the recordings there, or on Celestial Astrology on YouTube, or on either of our Substacks. So find her on Substack as well. She does some lovely recordings there. So if we go and start looking at September, this is the rundown of all of the aspects that we're going to be looking at over the whole of September. And if you join my paid Substack, then you can get all of the recordings for September in one go. And otherwise, we'll be releasing them week by week on Wednesdays to honour our good friend Hermes. And that is why we go Wednesday to Wednesday. So this particular week, we're going from the 28th of August to the 4th of September. And these are the aspects we're going to be looking at. And we were just discussing before we started about how some of these are what you would consider minor, and then how actually quite important a lot of these are when you dig into it. What stands out to you here, Janessa?
Yeah, I think September overall feels kind of like an important month out of the whole year. We have some of these bigger transits. I think one of the biggest ones that everybody's talking about is Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn. So that's happening this first week. We've got Venus entering Libra, which I think is huge. And then that Mars entering Cancer is also top of the list for me. So yeah, and anytime we have a lunation, I think that means it's kind of a busy week. So yeah, this first week really kicks it off.
Yeah, there's a lot happening, and you do a lot of talking about the light changing as well. And we've just had the sun moving into Virgo, and then it'll be moving into Libra, won't it, during this month? So that's going to signify a change as well. But we'll be covering that in the later week. Peter from AstroSeek does these charts, and it enables us to see where all the planets are moving. And Krista gave this lovely analogy last month, Krista from Practical Astros. And she talked about you can see the planets like raining down, and where they're raining and nourishing the soil and allowing the plants to grow and allowing what we're nourishing in our lives to grow almost. So it doesn't show the sun and the moon because we know where they are at the moment. We know that the sun this month is in Virgo and will be moving into Libra. She second guesses herself because it's August now while we're recording.
Right.
And it's literally moving today as we record, isn't it? No, tomorrow as we record, it'll move into Virgo. So for most of September, it'll be there. But we can see for Mercury here, it's going to move the most. It's going to move from Leo, travel through the whole of Virgo and up into Libra there. Venus traveling from Libra up into Scorpio. And then Mars is doing this journey. So Mars and Jupiter have been together in Gemini for a while, getting up to mischief there in Mercury's temple of Gemini. And we just had their conjunction. And now Mars is separating away into Cancer. And we need to get used to that energy because he's going to be there for quite some time. He's going to travel into Leo and then retrograde back. So I think we're going to be seeing that until 2025. That energy. So it's something we need to get used to. But then you can see the slower planets, Jupiter, Uranus, Chiron there, Neptune, Saturn is retrograding, which is why it's going backwards a little bit. And then, of course, Pluto just travelling over that boundary back into Capricorn. So have you got any thoughts on this, Janessa?
Yeah, I love this visual. I love that we can kind of like get a feel for the movement of the planets. It really puts it all into perspective with how quickly some move and how slowly the others move. I love seeing the bits of overlap. So like we'll see Mercury overlapping Venus there in Libra for a little bit. And like in the same way, we'll also see, you know, you can physically see the separation of Mars from Jupiter there, where they don't overlap or, you know, have moved on from that. Yeah, I love these for getting it sense, like a bigger picture sense of what's kind of going on for the month. And it kind of highlights then, I think, as Sonia, we were talking before we started recording about which signs then are kind of being affected. You know, we can see there's a lot going on in the mutable signs. There's we've got all of that action down in Gemini with Mars, Jupiter. We've got Saturn and Neptune up in Pisces. You've got Mercury transiting all through Virgo. Venus has just about left there when this will be published. So the mutable signs are probably going to be feeling a lot of this energy. And then we're kind of after that, there's still going to be a lot of mutable energy. Pisces, that stuff's not changing for a long time. Jupiter is going to be in Gemini, but we are going to see that shift into the cardinal signs too, with Mars going into Cancer, Venus in Libra. Towards the end of the month, the sun will enter Libra. So, and Pluto being back in Capricorn. So there's some shifting energy from like those ending mutable signs to the cardinal this time of year.
Okay, so into the first one, we've got Neptune opposite Venus, and we're going to go over these first couple quite quickly because we did cover them in last week's astrology update just to finish out the month of August. But we see Venus here at 29 Virgo and Neptune at 29 Pisces, just having a nice little spa day. What are your thoughts here, Janessa?
Yeah, I think I kind of like the Venus Neptune combination in general for like magic and mysticism and just really lovely romance. When it gets to that 29th degree and it's anaretic for both of them, I feel like the romance or the dreaminess maybe turns sour or a little bit darker, especially Venus being in detriment in Virgo, or in fall in Virgo. So yeah, I think there's like maybe like a dark underside to maybe some of the delusion that is fun to get wrapped up in. But yeah, we have the moon in Cancer, so that's lovely. You know, it might be lovelier than I'm making it out to be. But what do you think?
Yeah, there's always that. I mean, there's a whole sign square there to Jupiter and Gemini, so there's some support from the other benefic. The last time that they met was at 28 degrees of Pisces when they were together, and that was the 3rd of April 2024. So that's handy to know sort of how the cycle plays out to give a sense of timing. The planets that travel close to the sun, so you've got the sun, Venus and Mercury, kind of like if you think of like a dog walker with two excited dogs and they're running backwards and forwards, or children maybe, and they're running forwards and finding things, you know, look at this stick, or look at this rock that I found, and running back to mum with whatever they found. And mum or dad, the sun is more a masculine figure, but Mercury and Venus can go ahead and behind the sun like that, but the sun carries this steady path. So we tend to find that their cycles are around about a year. The sun travels around the whole zodiac in a year. So I think a lot of the oppositions that are coming up this month are like that year one, that year-long kind of timing that I was picking up. Either the oppositions or they're coming into the trine part of it. But yeah, that's how I feel. I mean, it's like the rose-tinted glasses that you can get, and Venus wants to love and bring the harmony, but Neptune can create those delusions and illusions. So it's very easy to put your lover on a pedestal or to meet somebody that you don't see the flaws in. So that's something to be wary of that day. You know, be wary of things just not coming to your attention that maybe should. With Neptune, you know, go here we call it beer goggles. You know, if you go out and you've had one too many and your judgment is impaired a little.
Yeah.
It's that kind of energy, really, isn't it? It's like, and also like a dissatisfaction with mundane aspects of life. You know, Venus wants everything to be fun and a party. It's all love, life, laughter, and joy with her. Mercury turns direct, and we've been waiting for this one, haven't we?
Yes.
21 Leo. So we've had this retrograde. It started its retrograde in Virgo at 4 degrees, and it's moved back. And we were saying about who does this affect? So the fixed signs will have felt this Mercury retrograde, and particularly so because they're also feeling that opposition, that whole sign opposition to Pluto up here. So they've got this very new energy of the whole sign opposition to Pluto, and then suddenly Mercury's retrograding as well. So Leo season, I mean, Janessa you posted this beautiful picture, didn't you, Janessa, the sunflower wilting.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that and explain it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I have these sunflowers in my yard that we planted. Some we planted in this bed of like compost, and it's like a raised bed. And those ones got giant super fast. And then we like when they were sprouting, you're supposed to kind of take some of them out so that when the seeds first sprout, so that they're not competing with each other. So we transplanted one of them into a different garden bed that's just in the ground. And that one took a lot longer to bloom, and did not get nearly as big. But the ones in the bed are like, I'm not exaggerating when I say they're like 15 feet tall, and they're like, they got so big so quickly, and the heads of the flowers got so big so quickly that they've done a good job standing up in storms and wind and everything, but they got so heavy that they just drooped immediately after like opening. So they hardly even got to like shine like they like to do. They're not facing the sun at all. They've just drooped. And it just reminded me so much of like this Leo season, and how there's just a lot going on. There's been a lot of we had this like mutable T-square, and like all of these different transits kind of happening at the same time, a big full moon, and Leo's kind of getting a little bit like forgotten about, or not getting to be as shiny, maybe because all of this stuff has kind of been affecting them too, and just maybe not as shiny of a Leo season for them with everything going on.
For sure. I mean, usually, I mean, I'm a Leo sun, and usually the season is full of like syncs, and like syncs as in noticing synchronicities and things opening up, roads opening up, new insights, projects opening up. So I was like looking forward to it, waiting for this time, sort of knowing it's like a reset time, of knowing you're on the right path. And it's like, oh, okay, things just got harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, this isn't how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's the astrology. So understanding the astrology really helps. And just that picture of your two sunflowers together, it's like, yeah, that's about it. Mercury retrograded back to Leo on the 14th, 15th of August, and it will get back to Virgo on the 9th of September. So we've still got a little bit of time while it's still in shadow. So the whole of the time that it's traveling back through Leo, it'll still be in that shadow even while it's going direct. And then it'll get out of the shadow 12th of September. But that's important because it also affects these planets here in Gemini that Mercury rules. So Jupiter as the greater benefic, and also Mars, where they did cause trouble, and whatever they've started is also being held back while Mercury's retrograde in shadow, combust with the sun, under the beams. Everything that's going on with Mercury is having an impact over here on these mutable planets. And then that's affecting the other mutable signs that these planets are then squaring in Pisces, and that they're opposed in Sagittarius. So if you're any of those signs and you're feeling things getting difficult, that could be why. Even though Mercury's retrograding in Leo, it could be because Mercury's ruling these planets. If that makes sense. Have I explained that well enough, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also interesting. I think Krista's pointed this out before too, with there's another image you can use from astroseek.com with where all of the Mercury retrogrades are happening for the year. And all of them this year are happening mostly in fire signs.
Yeah.
So I've felt this personally. I have fire signs in my 6th house, my 2nd house, and my 10th house. And I've had very Mercury retrograde issues with my business bank account. And it's only just gotten resolved now with this retrograde in Leo. So I was feeling that with the retrograde in Aries earlier this year, but I think those fire sign placements may also be feeling it more literally too.
Because sometimes if something comes up with the retrograde, it can keep coming up in stages with each retrograde. I told a story before about a webinar I went to, and a lady was talking about it, and she was expecting that it would resolve once Mercury went direct, and it didn't, but it did resolve in the next retrograde. So like you say, it doesn't always resolve during that one period. It can resolve from one retrograde to the next. Sometimes if it's a retrograde issue, you've got to wait for another retrograde for it to be set right, because this has been going on a long time for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, yep. Since Aries season.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? So the fire signs, you've got Aries, Leo, and then Sagittarius in this little like triangle formation in the chart. So if you're any of those signs, that's where the retrogrades are hitting. So yeah, if you had trouble coming up in Aries season, if you've got trouble now and it doesn't resolve when Mercury goes direct, November 24th, 26th of November.
Okay. So pretty close with the sun there too. Or shortly after the sun.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so we're not doing so good at being quick.
That's okay.
So Venus going into Libra. So this is significant because this is her home, isn't it? Her home sign. So she gains dignity here.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about this. It's sort of like a getting back on track with some stuff. We've had the retrograde, we've had a lot of stuff going on astrologically, and this feels like a nice little like, okay, reset. Let's get back to what we were doing. It's lovely that we have the moon in Cancer again for this ingress. Eventually we know Mercury is going to join back up into Virgo, and for a while we'll have them both dignified. So that feels nice.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, Libra is an air sign, so it's about our thoughts and feelings and words, would you say? And
yeah,
it can express in ways of like looking for fairness and diplomacy and justice. And sometimes that can be at your own expense. So with Libra, like Venus, she's still seeking fun and laughter and love, but also focused on peace, bringing peace. And sometimes peace can come at a cost. You see in peace negotiations, each side has to give way. So I think, the symbol is the scales, isn't it? What do you take off each side? So it's a balancing act, and you've got to make sure that you're not doing all the giving. I think you can see sometimes with a Libran person can sometimes give too much of themselves, and their efforts to keep the peace can be at their own cost.
Yeah, it's interesting too with this, it's not exact yet at the degree, but and I'm not the expert on this. Krista's our resident Antisha expert, but I love that Venus, or that Libra and Pisces have this Antisha, and that Saturn in Pisces, and that's the sign that Venus is exalted in. There's like this way of seeing each other, because Saturn exalts also in Libra, so that's kind of where the difference between like Venus and Taurus in its other home and Venus and Libra comes from, is like this Saturnian piece of it that is looking for like the balancing of the scales, or like the boundary setting of like defining justice, and defining beauty via this weighing of what's important. So it's kind of magical that while we have this transit of Saturn and Pisces, that every time Venus is in Libra, that they have this like secret communication happening, I think, there. So it could be a powerful time for, those types of justice activities that we would like to see to happen for society in general. But yeah.
And especially because we'll be seeing eclipses. We had one last at the beginning of the year, didn't we, at 5 degrees, and there'll be another eclipse this year, later this year in Libra, and the first eclipse coming up in Pisces. So those Saturn, Libra, Venusian, Saturnian conversations are carrying on, because we see the south node there. So once the sun reaches that south node, it's not too long, we get to eclipse season. So yeah, she will trine Pluto, but that ingress carries the energy of the whole of the transit, the whole of the time that she'll be in Libra.
Yeah.
And obviously she's trining that Pluto now. And one astrologer, and I do forget who, I'm sorry, did say that trines can hit different when it's Pluto. That trines are normally very easy. They're of the nature of Venus. So usually we look at them as being quite nice, straightforward. They're usually things that we hardly even notice because they're easy and feel natural. You just ease into it and ease out of it. It's not, usually we notice things that we're struggling with, but we don't always notice something that just comes easy. We breeze through it. But with Pluto, that can be an unmasking of something shadowy. And obviously in this case, something Venusian.
Yeah.
So that,
yeah, if you're saying that, it's kind of like that makes sense to me with Pluto. It's like, does such a thing exist as like underworld light? Like I don't like, light version of the underworld. Like I don't know that there does.
No, just that chink of light, but it's hard to imagine, isn't it? You think there must be some. It's like you need the darkness in order to see the light, but
yeah,
it's just that contrast. Because Adam, our teacher, was talking about the contrarieties in one of his lectures, and he was saying you have to have those contrarieties. You can't do without one. You need the opposites to make the whole.
Yeah.
Like yin and yang symbol. But in that, of course, in the dark, there is that roundness of light. And within the light, there is that spot of the dark.
Yeah, I think too, I maybe wasn't clear, but I think I mean like light, like low fat version or something, there's no watered down version of the underworld.
No.
It's the underworld.
Some of the stories have like when Orpheus goes to rescue his lady, whose name I can't think of at the moment, there is like that element of negotiation where he's allowed to rescue her, but there's conditions. He's not allowed to look back, and of course he does, and that's where it all goes wrong. But had he met the conditions, all would have been well. He was allowed to retrieve her, and people have been. Persephone was rescued from the underworld, so people have been rescued in the myths from the underworld. So there is that. Maybe that is the light in the underworld. That there is that element of negotiation there, rather than natural physical light. There is a place where we meet and where there is some element of negotiation. It's not all you're there and that's the door closed and locked. But yeah, it's a good question though. Yeah, gosh, that went deep, didn't it? Suddenly for
sorry, I know we're trying to go quickly.
Yeah, no, it's good to think like that though sometimes. So yeah, I put a question there to think about with Venus trining Pluto was, where does your bid for your own personal power, for shining your brightest light, scare you? So yeah, when you're trying to lean into that Venusian, embracing that Venusian Libran energy, does a part of that scare you? And that's actually what you need to be leaning into at this time. So okay, the new ones, we're into September now, the 1st of September, and Uranus has been causing trouble in the fixed sign of Taurus. Uranus, I call Uranus the awakener. He's like the planet, gets symbolized a lot by the lightning symbol. He can electrify and bring sudden insights, sudden things happening. I mean, there was so many pictures when Uranus met Mars of people having trees falling through their houses and things like that, wasn't there? And our own teacher had a tree in his yard that fell and just missed his house by inches. So Uranus has been meeting all of the planets, and now suddenly he's going to go retrograde here in Taurus. So he's reached 27 degrees. And he caused a lot of trouble at 26 degrees when he met the fixed star Algol, which is known to be a malefic, challenging star to some. It's thought to be a star of dark feminine power, which was interesting because it was the day that Trump was shot at his conference and thankfully survived, just through that move of his head. But it's the star of Medusa's head. So it was interesting that it was the head and the head movement that seemed to be significant. So it's just got 1 degree to go until we're back going over that. So issues may come up around that shooting, may be brought up again. I don't know when it reaches back to that degree, but it will retrograde back to 20. Yeah, retrogrades back to 23 degrees on the 30th of January. But there's no big conjunctions between now it retrograding back and then returning. It will meet with the sun, but that's when it's back at 27. So there's nothing as dramatic as there has been when it's met with all the planets up till now. So what do you think about this, Janessa?
Yeah, I think the outer planets going retrograde, any retrograde, I think it's about looking back to where we've been. So anything in the past few months coming back up where we've had kind of unexpected events, re-looking at what happened and really clarifying like what was the story there. Maybe some more to be revealed. Maybe it's just more questions. As some of these planets that had the conjunctions over the past few months start, right now they're averse, like they can't see that Uranus. So feels like they're not going to, the story is maybe not going to totally reveal itself yet until they get a little bit further away from that point that they met up. But definitely the start of like this making sense of and revealing of the events of what has transpired over the summer.
I've got some questions for us personally, because this is like the fixed sign. This is Venus's temple here. So again, the fact that Venus has her dignity in Libra makes a difference. It raises the dignity up here as well in Taurus. So it affects all the fixed signs. So we're also looking at Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So I've got these questions for those 4 signs, and that's if you've got your sun, moon, rising, and you may have other planets there. So it would be, you could either consult an astrologer, or you could get a free app like the Charney app, or look at AstroSeek to see your chart and see where your planets are. And if you've got planets in those fixed signs, they're the planets that don't really like change. So having Uranus there, and particularly around the time of the station, that can be when events happen. If it's affecting you, if you've got planets at 27 degrees of a fixed sign, it can be impacted. Says me ducking with a planet at 27 of a fixed sign. So the question that I've got is, like, Uranus is about the wisdom of individuation. And how important is it to you to be true to yourself? What price would you be willing to pay for that? And what would you be willing to risk for it?
I love that question. That's great.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? Because we get so conditioned by society into being what we think we're supposed to be. And Uranus is really coming along and saying, really?
Mm-hmm.
But what if, what if you fly?
Yeah.
And what would that cost you? And, is any of this real? So that's Uranus asking the deep questions, and that's what the outer planets do. The personal planets are more concerned with our mundane lives, our day-to-day who we love, where we work, how we think, and the outer planets ask us the bigger questions. And so we go on to Pluto, another outer planet. And Janessa, I know you've been looking at this quite deeply, so would you like to?
Yeah, I think this is kind of crazy, right? Like this is the last dip that Pluto will make into Capricorn in our lifetimes. I think this is a story that's been unfolding since 2008. Once Pluto goes into Aquarius permanently later this year in November, well, semi-permanently, for the next, until it will be there until 2040. So, yeah, it's like a big shift. I'm thinking about this a lot in terms of like this retrograde being this last check-in with where we've been. What are the themes? Like we need to get really clear on what those themes are. I think for me, it's still sussing it out, right? It's like, okay, that's how many years of data since 2008 that we've been collecting in our personal stories. And also as the collective being that it's this outer planet. So Capricorn being a cardinal sign was kind of when being that it starts things, and thinking of that in terms of like planting a seed and starting something new. So like for me, this retrograde is really about clarifying what seed was planted. And then whatever seed is planted is going to be carried out by Aquarius. And it's probably many seeds, right? It's like, again, so much time and so many things that are happening. But yeah, the retrograde always asking us to revisit, revise any opportunity. This is a huge opportunity to make any changes to where we want to see things going. I think, personally and collectively, yeah, I think I have a lot to say about that, but I think those are like the big themes. We had those two full moons in Capricorn in July, the last of which was at that 29th degree where Pluto will retrograde to. So if we can think back to then, things that were being highlighted, there's a lot of omens throughout the year that have been pointing to this degree and to this retrograde of like, what is it? What do we need to really listen to ourselves and to like tapping into like the energies at large and kind of use the retrograde to discern, I think, a lot. What do you think about it, Sonia?
Yeah, much the same. I mean, I've put down like the wisdom of transformation, because we sometimes I think of Pluto as empowering, that it can be difficult changes and scary changes that it brings, but I think it makes sure you're on the right path. And if you're not on the right path, you can be put there sometimes against your will, almost. Sort of the adjustments in your life to get you to the right place can be very difficult and challenging if you've not been listening to the omens and the signs around you that have been like hinting at the way forward. I think if you're tuned into that and you're following them, it's simpler and it's easier, which is not to say that it's somebody's fault if they're not. It's just that it can be more challenging. Whereas if you see those signs, I think the feedback seems to be that it's not as difficult when Pluto's transiting a sign, from what I've learned so far, what the people I've spoken to and the transits that they've experienced as they were having those transits. It was easier to make the transitions, and also understanding why you're being asked to make the transition and what you're being asked to do helps as well, like you're explaining sort of what's happening in Capricorn for you. Looking at the timing, it helps to then look at, okay, what am I being asked to do here? And understand what's changing for you, or to see the process of what's been changing. As well, like you say, looking back to 2008 and what's been happening since then, the shifts while Pluto's gone into Aquarius, and now what's being sewn up and finished. It's like the third coat of paint, isn't it? When it goes back, it's like it's done all the prep and the pre-work. I mean, you've been decorating recently, so you know how much work goes into that prep. That's like the hardest stage, like that first pass is like the really hardest work. And then the third pass is like the nice bits. You get to pull the masking tape off and see how it looks and buy your work. So this should be the easiest part of the process. You know, the putting all the nice trimmings on, you know, putting the lights on and taking photos to share with our friends of what we've created. That's what we hope. I've made some notes of the dates. It's the 12th of October 24 that it'll turn direct. So we've got it retrograde till then. And again, so that will be another shift at that 29 degrees. So until then, we're reviewing and revising, as you said, and then things start moving forward again. And then it re-enters Aquarius on the 19th of November. And also that Capricorn and Aquarius, they're the only two signs together in the zodiac that are ruled by the same sign, that are ruled by the same planet of Saturn. So there's a continuation here that you don't get when planets change through other signs. Usually there's a shift to a different planet, whereas here there's a continuation of the story. So it might not be such a huge shift as there are when there's ingresses to other planets, but it might be a continuation that Capricorn is more of a builder sign, that's earthy and building and creating something. And then in Aquarius, we get the big ideas and the big picture, and maybe an idea of where we're really going with this. How far can we take it? What do we really want to do with it? But in Capricorn now with the retrograde, we're being given the chance to see put all the foundations in that we really need. Have we done all the work it needs? Because this is like our last chance to put those structures in place. So I think that's what we need to be thinking about at this time. Wherever Capricorn is in your chart will give you a clue as to what's needed. I mean, for example, for me, it's my 9th house, and I've just signed up against my will because I was planning to do it in January. But as it turns out, looking at the astrology before Pluto goes direct, it seems maybe it was Pluto had other ideas that I needed to sign up for it now for a course, another astrology course that I was planning to do when the course I'm currently studying finishes, but the timing and course logistics changed. So yeah, maybe that's what Pluto's asking me to do, to get my astrology structure, which has been what Pluto in Capricorn I think has been about for me, because it's 9th house, it's that higher learning, and it's the house of like astrology as well. So I think that's what it's been asking me. But also Capricorn, like you say, being the cardinal sign of starting something, it's like that's also what was initiated in my life, was coming to astrology. So what started for you between 2008 and 9 and now? And have you put in as much structure as it needs? Because when Pluto goes into Aquarius, it may well build into something bigger than you imagined, possibly. Or it may change and shift, and you need that structure in place to support it. Was there anything else you wanted to?
No, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty, but I think that's a good note to end on.
Thank you, Pluto. So we're up to the new moon in Virgo too. So the decan rulers here are Venus and Saturn, and we've got this beautiful illustration from Nicola Art of the spider's web, and it just feels so Virgoan, doesn't it? The spider quality control, like carefully checking every detail, which seems apt for a new moon in Virgo at 11 degrees.
Yeah, I think of like just the archetype of Venus in Virgo. I always go straight to like the artisan, and to like some of your notes that are on the screen, like the eye for detail, the perfection of form. I have a dear friend who is like the ultimate craftswoman, has her ascendant in this decan, and yeah, just like the ability to create with that level of detail that is very foreign to me as a Jupiterian. That it's like it's a level that like transcends just the typical, I guess, of like just the intricacy of like a spider web, if that's such a great image.
Yeah, it won't surprise you that I've got planets in this decan.
No, not surprising at all.
When we're talking about my notes and the slides and everything else, it's like, this is where it's coming from. This is this decan at work.
Yes.
But yeah, if I'm going to do it, I'll end up drilling down into everything.
Yes.
So yeah, that's absolutely right. I attended a lecture about Mercury and Mercury's phases, because Mercury is the ruler here. And so I'm going to be popping these in as we go. But Mercury follows like this serpentine movement as he goes through his various solar phases with the sun. And Gary Caton has titled these phases, depending on where Mercury is in relation to the sun. And at this phase where Mercury's in its like elongation phase, he's titled the philosopher. So that gives us a feeling of what Mercury's up to, because there's different sides of Mercury. Mercury can be a trickster, can be a magician, can be the philosopher, can be a guardian, and can also be a psychopomp. You know, so he can be causing that mischief and sending us riddles and little winks and things that cause mischief during the retrograde and things like that. Or he can be very serious when he's doing his psychopomp role, or when he is in Virgo, just really paying this attention to detail and very focused. That does seem more as a philosopher, really digging into all the details. So even though he's in Leo, he's bringing some Virgo energy here. Kira Ryberg, the astrologer, calls this decan perfectionism. So we can see what the theme is, really. Austin Coppock calls it the hammer and anvil, that creation of using the force of the hammer and the anvil, but the work and the effort that goes into the creation as well. It's not just by accident, it's by focused effort as well to bring the creation. And Nicola Art calls it quality control. So that constantly keeping an eye on what's being produced as well, you know, checking, double checking, going back. So that's the energy that the new moon is bringing us. And new moons are like the fresh starts. So if there's something that you wanting to bring into the world, that you want to bring this kind of energy to, we often say that, like, if you imagine in an office or a workplace, you kind of need all sorts of different people for different kind of roles. And you can imagine that Virgos are very good at this kind of thing, you know, like editing or something, where they're going to do that quality control, or with the numbers and things like that, they would get the spreadsheets right or the slides right or something. So yeah, so there's a new project that you're starting, or a seed you want to plant where you want to bring this kind of energy in. This is a good time to do it. And again, it's the mutable signs. We've got the opposition here to Saturn. It's a whole sign opposition. It's not exact, but it's applying to it. And then it's squaring the Jupiter. Again, whole sign square, and Jupiter and Mars, really.
It's a very dynamic new moon, I would say. It's, you know, I don't want to be prescriptive in telling people to not start something. But you just have to know the ecosystem that this new moon is existing in. And, you know, we've got Saturn across the way that might kind of pump the brakes on some movement, or might make it a little bit more difficult. It might also just add some structure or, you know, limits, helpful limits, because limits can be helpful to whatever you're trying to start. And then we also have Jupiter in Mercury's sign, Mercury being in Leo. So it's a very mercurial Jupiter, and it's Jupiter in its detriment. So it's kind of, you know, a little bit unruly, and there might be a lot of ideas, and maybe this is a good signature then with that Saturn across the way to kind of help tamper some of the wildness of Jupiter and Gemini too. So
yeah, that's a good point.
And squaring Jupiter as well. So
yeah, because mutable energy can be like that, can't it? Its nature is to transition, to be not one thing or another. It's when the seasons are changing is the time of year that it reflects. So it's when you can leave the house and it's raining, and then halfway through the day it's hot and sunny, and then it's snowing by the time you leave work or something. So it reflects that kind of quality of change. So with that astrology as well, there's challenges there, isn't there? But like you say, with Saturn, it's kind of, you've got to lean into it with Saturn. You've got to know that those challenges and limits are going to be there, and be willing to learn from them and accept them, and then work with them.
mm-hmm.
If you're sort of like somebody applying for a mortgage or something, and giving up at the first challenge. You kind of got to be willing to like, okay, that's not working. How do we get around this kind of thing? Because not everything goes through the first time, or the first application gets accepted. I know somebody's going through this at the moment, had to go to different solicitors because one didn't work out, and it's been a difficult process for them. That seems like a Saturnian thing of like, well, are you going to stick with this and get around the problem and keep trying? Do you want this enough?
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, then it's going to really be something solid. Again, building those solid structures, building those solid foundations. And that's the rewards of Saturn when you put the time and effort in. I think I've heard you call it hard work and discipline before. If you put that hard work in and discipline, then you get the reward. But it's not an easy ride.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Jupiter just wants to bring all those opportunities in, and just expand things and make it easy and bring order to everything. But Mercury is more taking everything apart and looking at it and dissecting it all into all the little pieces. So there's a lot of contradiction going on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot, like you say. So yeah, depending on what you're starting, it's making it fit with that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Was there any advice, or should we move on?
I think that's good. I think just whatever you're starting is probably not a straightforward path. There's going to be some challenges. There's going to be some yeses and some nos, and
Yeah.
Yeah, it's winding. It's not straight.
Yeah, just be prepared for that and roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got Neptune squaring Mars. So we've got Mars there in Gemini still, approaching the anaretic degree. Neptune at 28 degrees there, Mars at 28 degrees. Another mutable square. And they met in Pisces on the 28th of April in conjunction. And this is an opening square. So it's like new moon energy when they meet. And then the opening square, first square when they separate, is like first kind of adjustment of, okay, what needs looking at now? What do we need to change? Whatever they started together. So again, this is mainly going to affect mutable people, particularly Pisces people where they met in Pisces, but also Gemini, Virgo, and Sag. Okay, what did you think, Janessa?
Whenever I hear Mars and Neptune, I always think back to a talk I heard our teacher Adam Allenboss give about how that signature in a birth chart can be things that are like spiritual physical activity. So like martial arts or yoga. I think he even put like surfing in there, or like, soaking in a hot tub or a sauna. So those are kind of like the activities that come to mind in general for me, like during a transit like that. Like it could be very literal of like maybe there's like a surf competition or or a martial arts competition that is happening in your life. But yeah, thinking about those Mars significations of like action orientated activities, even things like transportation or cars or like anything with an engine. And then like the Neptune adding like this weird layer of mystique or spirituality to it, and kind of like how those might interact in like a dynamic square way where there's a lot of like tension, but like action being taken archetypally, how I see that. I don't know. What do you think of, what are your thoughts on that?
Sort of wrote down like happiness is a fleeting state of mind rather than a permanent status update. And I was listening to somebody talking about that this morning of apparently something Oprah said as well, that don't seek happiness, seek happier. Just like as something you can do, because happiness isn't a way of being. Quite often most of us live mundane lives, even like this wealthy yachter. You just think of him at the moment, that's the yacht that sunk, which is very Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, but he had all these troubles in his life, money doesn't bring a happy life, certainly, or family doesn't always bring a happy life, because there will be Martian conflicts and tensions within a family, usually, unless does anybody have the perfect children and the perfect wife? And if you do, does then boredom seep in? It's like, can you get the perfect happy setup, all we can really do is seek to be happier and to recognize happiness when it comes, and to realize that it's like a fleeting moment of, oh yes, this is a happy moment, and to just take a mental snapshot of it, or an Instagram literal picture and post it or something and share it, rather than to seek that nirvana status, that Neptunian. I mean, again, not to get too deep, but our teacher as Mellenbus talks about us all being in the fish tank, and that some people seek to leave the fish tank, that they think they're seeking some sort of transcendence, and they think that's their happiness, whereas actually realizing that we're all in the fish tank, and that is our life, and we can live our lives out in the fish tank in any way we choose, but we're contained within the fish tank. We are human beings on earth, and we can be a soul on earth, but we are earthbound. And that is our life, and that this seeking of transcendence is that what we're supposed to do here, or are we here to actually just live an earthbound life in whatever way we see fit, to enjoy it? You know, is that our purpose? And maybe that's what Neptune is here to teach us, and maybe those illusions and delusions are giving us a fog because we're not in the right place, and again the fog lifts, and then we have these insights. But maybe sometimes Mars is calling us to adjust and get closer to a happier place, and that Mars can be calling you to take some smaller adjustments to your life that might get you happier, which is quite nice. Mars goes into Cancer. Yeah, so it's quite a big deal because he's been with Jupiter in Gemini for quite a while, and we've definitely felt that energy. And in Cancer, we're bringing back that cardinal energy, aren't we? And it's going to be opposite Pluto. So we're going to feel that.
It's immediately squaring that moon too, Libra. So might be with the moon, I always think of it being more felt, or more somatic, and more, you know, brings things down to the earth. It could be a very like sensual in the sense of like being able to feel it.
So moon being the closest to Earth. The moon is the only planet that actually
orbits the Earth.
Yeah, the moon is like our planet, and it's closest to us. So the moon gathers up information from all the other planets and translates it to us here on Earth. Information, I suppose. So the moon is like our translator, our go-between us on Earth. And the reason I call this, like the ancients believed it was Cancer was the portal of mortals, being moon ruled. So they believed that spirits entered the Earth through Cancer and then left the Earth through Capricorn, being Saturn ruled. So the fact that they've got that relationship is really nice there, as Mars enters the moon's sign. For an extended stay, because that ingress carries the energy of the stay. And quite nice that the moon's with this sexmate Venus. And I've got some dates. It's here until November. It moves to Leo, and then it will retrograde back into Cancer in January 2025. Leaves Cancer finally to go to Leo again in April 2025. So it really is quite some time that we're going to be feeling that. And Adam, our teacher, talks about it as like the mama bear energy, because we see the protective side of Mars. He's not got a lot of dignity here, but Mars as like the shield. If you think of Mars, he's got a shield and a sword, and it's more of the shield side of Mars that we see here, I think. What does he protect? What does he fight for? And in Cancer, it's all about the home, women. It sort of represents women, women's rights, women's bodies. So those kind of issues. Adam was talking this morning about it, that we might see coming up around this time, or we might see conflicts, a heating up of those issues around that. But certainly, personally, we might find conflicts around that coming up, or we might find resolution, or a need to protect or to advocate for those things.
Yeah, I echo all of that. I'm just looking now at, Venus there. I love that the moon and Venus are together. I don't love that the south node is there with Venus during this. She's kind of, so the Cancer is ruled by the moon. The moon is in Libra, ruled by Venus, which is also there. And Venus is really close to that south node. And the south node kind of, even though Venus is at home in Libra, the south node can kind of make things weaker or smaller. So I wonder about that, like slightly weakened Venus not having as much of that power as it would be nice to have with this transit, or to imbued in the start of this transit. So that's something to watch for, I guess, is the issue of women is huge, I would say, for sure, with this transit. And what does that look like? We'll see.
It's also the exaltation of Jupiter, but it can't see Jupiter.
Right.
So
Jupiter's not in great shape there in Gemini either.
no, so they're both a bit dinged up, as Adam would say,
Yeah.
and averse to each other.
Yeah.
So what we might see is, I always think for Cancerians, is because the moon travels so fast, there might be ebbs and flows as the moon travels through signs that it can see, and the moon has different dignities in different signs. We might see these issues flare up, settle, resolve, as the moon's exalted in Taurus and in domicile in Cancer, but it will travel through the whole of the zodiac in 1 month. So we might see these issues changing fast as the moon travels fast. Even though Cancer's there for an extended stay, we might see an acceleration of these things as well, because Mars likes speed, even though he's slowed down in Cancer, but also the moon is fast moving.
Yeah, I think that's right on. That's perfect. That's like exactly what the takeaway should be of this, is like the story is going to be in where the moon is traveling during this time. So watching that, tracking that, it's all about the moon.
Yeah, so the lunations will be important going forward. The eclipses, particularly, that are coming, will be important, and where they fall, and the moon's dignity in them, and also what planets are talking to who and how that affects them, I suppose. Okay, so that ends the first week in September. Thank you so much, Janessa, for joining me, and we'll see you next week.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Do you have anything you want to say to sum up?
No, I think it's just a busy start to September. Yeah, it's busy.
It is. Good luck, everybody. And the main thing to remember is that, like, these transits don't affect everybody. We've tried as we go along to say who's affected by these transits. The main thing is to roll with it. Don't resist the change. If you see changes coming, if you see signs around you or synchronicities that we've been talking about that are pointing you in a certain direction, pay attention, and be aware of the astrology, and see if you can understand by looking at your chart or working with an astrology app what's going on for you, because that really helps understand, put together the events in your life and the astrology. But yeah, don't allow yourself to worry about them, because nobody really knows what's happening. We can only predict archetypally what's happening with the signs and everything. So yeah, but if you've got any questions or anything, please do let us know in the comments and we'll be happy to help you. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us for the weekly forecast. You often hear creators ask you, could you please like and subscribe? And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for small channels. It really does make the difference. And also, we all want to reach the audience that our content is made for, and we can do this with your help. If you've enjoyed it, it gives us immediate feedback on what you're enjoying and what you would like more of. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's a great way for you to support our work and just let us know that you're enjoying what we're doing. So if you have enjoyed this content through to the end and you'd like us to keep making it and make more of it, that's a great way for you to let us know. So wherever you're watching this, please do give us a thumbs up and give us your support, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.